I'm Johnny Noakes. I'm the director of the Tony Little Centre for Innovation and Research in Learning at Eton, and we're hosting today's webinar. This is one in a series in which we invite experts to talk about areas that are of primary interest to educators and to educational leaders. And today, our topic is how to give pupils the critical leadership and life skills they need to thrive in a changing and uncertain future. In a moment, I'll introduce our speaker, but first, just a couple of housekeeping points. The session lasts an hour. The talk will last for the first half an hour or 40 minutes or so, and that will be followed by question and answer. If you have a question during the talk, please put it into the chat box, and my colleague Iro Constantinou will marshal those questions at the end. But there will also be an opportunity for you to ask the questions live and to enter into a discussion with Elke. We will be recording the session to put onto our website. If you want to make sure that you don't appear, you might want to turn off your camera. Can I also ask that you mute your mic so that we don't have a lot of background noise going on during the course of the talk? Thank you very much. Let me now introduce our speaker, and I'm very excited about having Elke with us today. She's a speaker, she's a writer, she's a performance coach. She specializes in transformational leadership and life skills. Elke is the founder and creative director of Ivy House London. And prior to that, she founded and ran the multi-award-winning executive development company Blue Sky, where she worked with 40% of the FTSE 100 leaders for companies such as Virgin or Centrica, Barclays, BBC and RBS, and so on. So working at the very highest levels in the corporate world. But in recent years, Elke has started to bring that knowledge that previously was only available to these top-level executives to people earlier in their careers and earlier in their lives. First of all, making the same knowledge available to high potential early career young people, and then latterly bringing it into schools. Ivy House has created an online course called The Award, which brings this same knowledge to sixth form students. We've trialed it here at Eton, as have a number of other schools. It's absolutely fantastic, and I can strongly recommend it to you. There's more information about it on the Ivy House website. Elke is also the author of a book recently published called Extraordinary: How to Lead a Bigger, Braver, More Meaningful Life. And in that, she argues that we are at a time of profound change when our old ideas of a successful life or a successful career no longer fit. She has a very clear, very passionate message about values-driven, purposeful leadership. And she speaks it not only with passion, but with great authority. One of the reasons why I admire her so much is she combines very clear vision with having her feet firmly on the ground. I'm absolutely delighted, Elke, that you're with us today. Thank you so much for coming in. Let me hand over to you.
Thank you, Johnny. I wish I could take you with me and I'd get that introduction wherever I went. That's super cool. Thank you. So lovely to be here with you all this afternoon. I would encourage you, if you're happy to show me your face, to put your videos on, because I much prefer talking to people that I can actually see. Just a quick house, I don't know if we can turn off the binging that comes as people join us, but that would be great if we could do that. So I would like to start this session with a couple of questions. Now, if you've ever heard me speak before, I'm expecting you to put the answers into the chat or write them down on a piece of paper. But for the first two questions, please give me an answer in the chat. And Iro is then going to share those answers that come up for me. So this is my first question. My first question is, how many truly happy people do you know? And when I say truly happy, I'm talking about people that love their work. I'm talking about people who are in relationships that work for them. And I'm talking about people that actually feel good inside, actually don't spend time with a whole load of destructive thinking, but actually feel good, confident and strong the majority of the time. So just put your number in the chat. Really interested to see what you've got to say. And Iro, as the numbers come through, maybe you could just let me know what people are saying.
Well, I would say it ranges from 0, a few, to maybe, well, I would say 30, 40 is the maximum so far. But most people have single digit numbers here.
Yeah, so what the average roughly, it's usually around the lower ends,
Yeah,
the single
yeah,
digits, is
yeah,
that right?
yeah, definitely
Okay.
there's a lower end, yeah.
So here's my second question then, and those of you that have heard me talk before, hear me ask this question time and time again, but I'm not going to stop asking it because I think it is really important. How many extraordinary leaders do you know? Same thing, put the answer into the chat. How many extraordinary leaders do you know?
Well, the majority of people are saying 1 or 2. Someone said 70, which is really interesting. But yeah, I would say the majority of people are saying between 1, 2, or 3.
Okay, thank you. So why do I ask you these two questions? Because the reality is we have never known so much about what it takes to create a happy life. And we've never known so much about what it takes to become an extraordinary leader. And yet, so often when I ask this question, the numbers are still woefully low. The question is if we have the knowledge and we're still not getting the results we want, which would be happy people, extraordinary leaders, then what is it that we are going to do about that? How do we bring what we know about life and leadership skills and make it part of how we develop the next generation? So that when somebody asks that question in 1, 5, 10 years' time, that we're going to get far larger numbers. So that's really the essence of my talk this afternoon. I'm going to look at how we put life and leadership skills at the heart of education. And to do that, I want to look at why it matters, what we're actually talking about when we're talking about life and leadership skills, how we do it, and then, of course, take questions and answers. Now, before I do that, I did want to just introduce myself, but Johnny did that so perfectly. I'm going to skip through this, but there's just something I wanted to tell you, which is, as Johnny said, I've spent my life working at a senior level in business, 25 years coaching some of the most senior people across pretty much every sector. And when I did that, I realized something. I realized that there are a set of skills and knowledge that, when mastered, make a game-changing difference, not just to the leaders people became, but to the lives they led. And that led me to sell my business and create Ivy House, because I became obsessed with this idea of, well, if we know this, if we know that these skills and knowledge exist, why aren't we giving it to the next generation? Why aren't we better equipping people? So I started a new business, Ivy House, that was 5 years ago, and we still work with a range of amazing organizations, but we work with their younger people. We work with their emerging leaders, their future leaders, their graduates, their apprentices. And as Johnny mentioned, we now work with a range of amazing schools who are really committed to putting leadership and life skills at the heart of how they educate their students. So let's start with why it matters. Now, I could probably spend 2 days on this subject alone, and I suspect a lot of you feel the same. Why does it matter? So I'm going to start with some stats. And again, there are millions of these stats. And in fact, I would ask if anyone has any that are brilliant, please put them in the chat, because I'm always up for using other people's stats. But I've grouped them, just for ease sake, into 3 key areas. Firstly, we have a skills crisis. So in the world of work, what we're noticing is, number one, we have a leadership crisis. 86% of the respondents at the World Economic Forum believe that we're in the midst of a global leadership crisis. Now, I use that stat a lot, and people will laugh and go, is it only 86% that thought we were in a leadership crisis? But you can back that up with stats around, 78% of people don't trust the leaders that we've elected to lead us. So there's a whole lack of trust around the leadership we have. Then we look at actually what CEOs are saying their biggest problem are in business. And 77% of CEOs are saying one of their biggest problem in business is a lack of skills within business. And the skills they're talking about, we'll talk about in a moment. And then the fact that 69% of leaders believe that graduates or apprentices coming into work are not equipped for the world they're entering. And then, of course, we have the whole well-being reason. And again, the stats on this are truly frightening. The three I've picked today, firstly around students, 88% of students in school, this is, saying that they're struggling with feelings of anxiety. This one really got to me. 74% of undergraduates in 1 year, this came from the Pearson report, said they suffered from their mental health. That's 74% of graduates. I mean, that's just of undergraduates. And of course, that doesn't just happen in school and in university, but it also happens in the world of work. Last year alone, we lost 12.8 million days to stress. The cost of that alone is incredible. And now, of course, we're also moving into an employment crisis. In June 2020, over 500,000 people aged 16 to 24 were unemployed. And by June this year, only 4% of graduates had secured jobs. Now, what's interesting, people say, well, of course that's the case because of COVID, but actually most graduate positions are secured well before COVID actually hit us. Now, while this is still an incredibly low number, only 4% of graduates having secured a job, there isn't much prospect. It will go up slightly, but the predictions are not that it will go up. And then, of course, this is the one that gets me here every time. 80% of the professional roles are still being filled by students from better backgrounds. So when we look at social mobility and inequality, that is a really startling stat. So it's easy, I guess, to start with the stats to ask ourselves why, but I think there's a rude awakening here about the fact that what we're doing right now in preparing the next generations to work, to thrive in work and in life isn't quite working. And then there's another piece around the fact that the world of work is changing. And when I say it's changing, I mean it's really changing. So the students that you are educating right now, they're entering a global market for jobs. What does that mean? That means they're competing with people from all over the world for a smaller set of jobs. And I was talking to one of our alumni a number of months ago now, and she'd applied for an internship. There were over 5,000 applications for that internship. She'd got down to the last 20. And she said to me, you know, Elke, she said, I was one of two of my type in the room out of 20. And what she meant by that was she'd gone to a good British school and got a good education. She said, I was competing with people. She said there was one guy there from India that had never been to a normal school in his life. He had completely self-educated himself from the internet cafe that sat on the edge of his slum. And she said, when I stood next to him and told them why they should employ me, you know, his story was just incredible. So they are able to apply for jobs all over the world, but they are competing with the best students from everywhere. The second point, of course, is we're in the midst of the fourth industrial revolution. And what that really means is that the jobs that they're going to be applying for, many of which haven't been invented right now, but many of them are already very, very different. It's estimated that around 73% of roles right now have changed up to 50%. So clearly that's happened a lot recently where we're having to lead remotely and all the rest of it. But the reality is that the jobs that they are applying for are the jobs that computers can't do. That means they require human skills. They need to collaborate, communicate one-on-one, across culture, across time zone, one to small groups, one to many. Therefore, they need to be able to access their confidence. The point is that in this world that they're entering into, knowledge is no longer power. So where maybe we had an education system that focused on retaining knowledge, regurgitating knowledge, actually what we're looking for now in the world of work is where do you find the best trusted, the best source of knowledge, and how do you take what you need from it to solve what we're calling wicked problems, problems that we have never solved before. And of course, the other thing about the Industrial Revolution, it's been very easy to date to keep a job that you weren't very good at, quite frankly. And actually that doesn't last, it doesn't happen so much anymore, in the sense that if you don't have the skill and capability to bring people along with you, to create followership, then you will no longer be tolerated. The other thing is that employment is changing. It's estimated that by 2025, around 75% of people will be self-employed. Now that has massive implications on the skills they need. They're going to need to know how to sell themselves. Sales, of course, has always been a bit of a dirty word in Great Britain, but actually people are going to need to be able to pitch themselves for jobs. When they get there, and if they get the job, they're going to need to know how to build a network and how to retain that network over time. They're also going to have to be agile learners, because they're going to have to reshape their skill set depending on what the client needs. So organizations, their core teams are shrinking all the time. They're employing people on a contract basis. And as we've just discovered, everybody can work from wherever they are in the world. So this is really important, that the skills we're giving these people are to actually cope with themselves as a brand. And that's the final bit around the changing world of work, is we are a brand, we sell ourselves, we have to take care of that brand in terms of how valuable are we, and therefore will we be bought by a future employer. So actually, when you look at that whole group of things that are changing, it's going to be essential that we then equip students to do the best job they can as they get out. And I think this was probably best summed up by Jack Ma, who is, for those of you that don't know, the CEO of Alibaba. It's one of the top 10 most valuable corporations in the world. And at Davos, he said this: if we do not change the way we teach, 30 years from now, we're going to be in trouble. The knowledge-based approach of 200 years ago is failing our kids. They can't compete with machines. They need to be taught soft skills, independent thinking, values, and teamwork. I could give you quote after quote of business leaders telling us that we need people that can talk, can create, can collaborate, can adapt, can be agile learners, and can be resilient in the face of getting feedback that maybe they don't like. So that's the why. Let's move on then to the what. What is it we're actually talking about? What are these skills that we need to give these younger people? Well, there are hundreds of different slices through this question. And I saw somebody speak recently who gave multiple models of character education. I wanted to just call on two pieces of information to talk about this. The first is the Deloitte Millennial survey. It's a survey they do every year, and it looks, amongst other things, at the most important skills that are required of a new working generation. Now, this is interesting. These skills are in priority order. So I'm going to shut up for a second while you read them. So what I find really interesting about this list is that it is not until we get to number 14 that we're actually looking for a knowledge-based skill. Everything else is what we would call human skills. And right at the top is the ability to build interpersonal, to actually create relationship with other people. I just want you to reflect for a moment on all of those incredible students that you have. And I know, we have five girls, and actually I see some of the amazing brains, and how many of them are also incredibly good at communicating, to build relationships. If you put them in a room with a whole load of people they didn't know, where they were asked to present and actually be confident, how would they show up in that sense? And I know there are some that would be brilliant, but how big a proportion of those? So the skills that businesses are looking for are these human skills. In Ivy House, we've nailed it down to what we call the Ivy House 7. And it's these are the skills that we really focus in on when we work with the emerging leaders. And that's the high potential talent of all the clients that I showed you earlier. These are the skills that they're asking for. So the first is that we operate from core strength, that we understand who we are, what we're here to do, and the value, what puts us in our element. I always use the example of my husband, who's a lawyer. If you asked me to go and be a lawyer, I would be an absolutely rubbish lawyer. And it's important that I find that out about myself as soon as possible, so I can find the path that I should have gone on. Then there's the skill of taking 100% ownership for the behavior, the impact we have. The skill of understanding how our mind works, why we behave the way we do, why we feel the way we do, why we think the way we do. And then the ability to become what we call a courageous learner. And I'm not talking about academic learning. I'm not talking about whipping your way through the course material. What I'm talking about is having the courage to be open in the face of somebody disagreeing with you, the ability to listen to a different opinion and hold your own opinion lightly, the ability to learn by failing and making mistakes and actually picking yourself up after that and growing. So it's a learning agility that we're looking for, and that is absolutely in demand right now. The ability to create intentional relationships, to show up to your relationships and be able to have meaningful, difficult, sometimes tough conversations. And then, of course, one I suspect that is very dear to all of our hearts right now, the skill of being proactively well, looking after our mental, spiritual, emotional, and physical health. All of this leading to what is known as human leadership. So those are the skills that businesses are looking to create. And what this really means in terms of how it manifests is giving young people the opportunity to ask these kinds of questions. What kind of life are you trying to create? Do you know how to take 100% responsibility for making that happen? Have you decided who you want to be, not just what you want to do? And it goes on and on. And I suspect when you look at these questions, you will recognize that this is not a case of something you can have a textbook for. This is a case of having something where you need the space to think about them and the tools that will help you do that. So these are the sorts of skills that businesses are demanding, that human beings are demanding, that are important to them. And I know, because you're all here listening to this talk, that there is a massive groundswell within education of how do we put that in. And I think that I have to really go to a word of caution. We have to become really aware that we don't put a sticking plaster over a dirty wound. We don't try and approach this in the same way that we have previously approached very different kinds of learning, because it's very different. It is not a case of, you know, this is a set of character skills that you need. Actually, the most important thing we can do is help people find out the kind of character that they are, that they want to be, and what they want to bring to the world, and then give them the skills to do that. Let me explain what I mean about that. This, you might not recognize yourself, but this is you. It's also me and Johnny and Iro. All of us have a blueprint. To most people, our blueprint is in some parts highlighted, in some parts it's quite invisible. But it's made up of our vision for our life, the forces that drive us, the values that we have, many of which are often invisible, the beliefs we have, both limiting beliefs and empowering beliefs, whatever it is that puts us in our element, and our purpose. Now, what we know from working with leaders across the world is the very best leaders, the people that live the most successful lives, are the people that understand this stuff about themselves. They have a blueprint and they understand, therefore, which journey they should be traveling. Now, of course, what happens when we don't understand this kind of blueprint is living like this, living completely out of balance. Now, I've got to tell you, even when you know your blueprint, you will have days like this. I had one yesterday and I am all over my blueprint, but we have days like this. But the benefit of living from a place of core strength and knowing our blueprint is we have the ability to rebalance. So I can tell you now, for example, one of my personal values is freedom. If I find myself in an organization or working with a client where that value is violated, very quickly I will become this person. But because I know this stuff about myself, because I am able to go, I'm feeling pretty bad, and now I know why, I can bring myself back into balance quite quickly. And it's that kind of skill where we're helping people understand who they are and how to live their best lives that we need to bring to the next generation. So how then do we make that happen? I think this is really interesting. It's really tempting right now to go into a whole talk, and I'm happy to do another one if you're interested, about the intricacies of how we bring exactly this kind of learning into people's mindset. But I think there are some broader, more strategic questions that I think we need to answer. And it starts, I think, with naming the elephants in the room. And there are many elephants. Johnny and I have had this conversation on many times, and he very much calls them a family of elephants, which is something I love. But we absolutely need to name them, and we need to deal with them. The first, of course, is that the way schools are held accountable is the key driver of their behaviour. And right now, all schools are held so accountable against exam performance. So the reality is if we're going to make space and time for leadership and life skills within our school environment, I guess we're going to be doing it because we know it's the right thing to do, and not necessarily because it is ticking a box. The second thing, the second elephant I guess we need to name is most teachers are not experts in this kind of teaching. It's as if you were to ask me to go and teach A-level physics tomorrow. Well, I'm sure I could go and buy myself, maybe not tomorrow, but even in a year's time, I could buy myself some exercise books, I could watch lots of videos. But would I be an expert in teaching people physics? No, it definitely wouldn't. Well, leadership and life skills is the same thing. So what this actually requires is a coalition approach. You actually need to access some experts and people that understand what it takes to enable people to be empowered in this way. And then I think we need to work together with what I would call socially driven businesses that are really, really behind equipping the next generation and just putting them in the space where kids can talk to them and have a real understanding of what matters. And I know a lot of that happens in school. And then, and I think this is so important, is in your schools is to find those passionate, open to learning teachers that will be your catalyst to making this happen. The next elephant is the fact that there has never been a greater need for this kind of teaching, and we can see that with the frightening stats. In fact, I'll share this one with you because this was just horrible to hear. A week ago, my daughter, who is in Leeds doing art history, told me that one person on her year had died this year from COVID, and 10 had committed suicide. So that stat wasn't right up front, but these are the sorts of stats that we receive all the time in this business. There has never been a greater need for this kind of learning. And considering what everyone in schools is going through right now, there's also never been less time, or in fact, less energy to address it. And I think that is a very real tension between being ideal, the ideal situation, and making a start. So what can you actually do right now? Well, I think the first thing we need to do is we need to bust some myths. And the first one really is the fact that kids will pick up this learning along their way. It's about experience and getting out there into the world and toughening up and having experience. It's just rubbish. It's just not true. I spent my life 25 years working with leaders, and I can tell you now that they are having the same anxieties that a lot of the 16-year-olds are having right now. Maybe in a different form, with different contexts, but we can see that from the stats around stress, depression, anxiety that are going on in the workplace. So the reality is that people aren't picking up these skills along the way. We need to actually pay attention to them and give them time and space. So how do you do that? Well, I'm just sharing some examples that are given to me by some of the schools we work with. You need to start thinking outside the box. So if teachers don't have the time to facilitate this kind of learning, then what about non-teachers? I have a great school client that has their finance manager, their marketing manager, the head of the PTA, that are all working with facilitating groups of students in this way. You also need to recognize that in this world that we live in right now, that we might well be working face-to-face with a group 1 minute and then having to work virtually the next minute. And then I think what we need to do is we need to look at what we're already spending time doing, something that we might have agreed to 30 years ago in our school, and ask, is it still relevant? Does it still bring the value we need it to bring with the time that is currently allocated to it? that I think takes what we would call having the courage to look at the raw facts and go, we're using our time in all of these ways. Is each one bringing the absolute value we need to bring? And then within your schools, you need to find what I referred to earlier as your catalysts. I've only been working within schools for the last 3 or 4 years, and actually what I've learned is actually within each school there are these people that absolutely believe that the purpose of education is to enable kids to thrive, and that to enable them to thrive they're going to need a new set of skills. Find those people within your school and then give them the reading, the training, the videos to watch that will enable them facilitate this kind of learning. Because it is a facilitation, by the way, it is not a teaching. And I think that's really important when you choose the people that are going to engage in this, is that you're actually not looking for people that are looking to be experts. You're looking for people that can facilitate the journey alongside the students, be learners alongside the students. And I know some people really struggle with that. And then it's about making a start, actually just starting. As I said, as you know, I've spent my life in corporates. I've been part of so many corporate change programs and so many organizations. They fall into 2 buckets. The first bucket is we're not going to change anything until we have all our ducks in a row, and we have massive fear of failure. So we're not going to do anything that might upset the apple cart. And of course, you know what happens along the way is that time never comes, by the way, is they lose their catalyst, and the catalysts lose their energy. The other group of people, they say, do you know what, we're going to get the essentials in place, and then we're going to get started, and we're going to learn from what we do. We're going to learn along the way, and we are, in fact, going to role model agile learning. So that's what I think all of us need to do in this time, is to find a way to give kids the support. When I'm not talking to schools, I am talking to senior leaders, and they have a lot of stress on them right now. But I've got to say, to end, I guess, that the most important leaders in this country right now are teachers. Are teachers that are prepared to stand up and say things need to change, and teachers that are prepared to say that we have these young people for years and years, we have them in education, and it's our job to find a way of better equipping them for a changing and a very uncertain world. Because, you know, I guess this is my last question for today, but if not you, then who is going to do it? It really is down to you. And there are lots of people out there to support you if this is the route you want to take. So I'm going to stop talking now. I am very happy to answer any questions. You can put them in the chat or take yourself off mute. As Johnny mentioned, if you want to learn more about this kind of leadership and life skills and how we bring that to people, then you can listen to our podcast, which is called Extraordinary Unplugged, or read the book, which is called Extraordinary. And as he also mentioned, we have a program called the Ivy House Award, which we work with a number of schools to support actually your catalytic, I shouldn't give that word, catalysts in your schools to enable you to put this kind of learning into your school. So I will stop the share, and if there are any questions, I'm really happy to answer them.
Thank you so much, Elke. That was super interesting. So many. I mean, the stats by themselves are great, but also I think the points you made were very important. And I think, well, loads of people agreed, and they said you make some very fair points. I will ask a few of the questions that came in the chat, and then if anyone else wants to come on the mic, if you just put a note saying, "Can I come on?" I will then put you on the mic. One of the questions was about state schools have a lot of restrictions, so the curriculum is pretty rigid, money is not always available. How do you think people can overcome some of these sort of problems to do some of the things you're saying?
I love that question, because that's a conversation Johnny and I were just having. So I am really excited to say one of the benefits of having a massive corporate client base is we've been going and asking them for money. So we have our first sponsor from the NatWest Group, which is a big client of ours, who have just made available 1,000 student places and 20 teacher places to come free on the programs. And my personal mission is to go out and talk to every client that we work with. I have, I think, 6 client conversations planned for the next few weeks, to talk to them about putting together funds to enable the fund side of things to happen. So that's the first thing. If you're interested, as I say, come on our website and you will learn more about that. The second thing, in terms of time, I completely get it. And, you know, I absolutely completely get it. And I think the reality is like none of us can magic up more time. What we can do is decide, are we spending our time where we should be spending it? Is this an extracurricular that we can offer? And are there other people that could do it instead of our absolutely exhausted, really hardworking teachers right now? Again, we have a lot of people in the corporate world that have gone through our programs. I mean, long, deep programs that are happy to help and facilitate groups for schools. So I think we just have to start thinking outside of the box and not kill ourselves in trying to do absolutely every single thing, you know, to get through it all ourselves. We have to work in coalition, in collaboration with people that are really motivated to support your guys in bringing this education to the kids.
I guess that links to one more point, which was that even though teachers have a passion about a lot of the things you were talking about, that they don't find enough organizations to engage with. So I guess you answered that if people have a look at your website, they can have a look at organizations that might be willing to work with them. Can you explain a little bit more about that, Elke? Yeah,
so that isn't on the website, but one of the things, I'm probably going to get shot for mentioning this now because all the publicity hasn't yet come out, but we're working on something in conjunction with Eton and Ben Bessie at Camford, called a number of other people, actually, Rachel Johnson at Pixel, a number of other people that are involved, called the Future Leaders Project. And actually, within the Future Leaders Project, there will be resources, free resources, and we already have a lot of free resources, by the way, on our website, free resources. A conference which we're going to be bringing corporate speakers, again, all free for students to enter and actually start having discussions, real life, proper conversations, you know, actually going, if you show up like that, there's no way you're going to be getting this job. Let me tell you why, you know, so actually bringing it down to ground. And then there's going to be Future Leaders of the Year competition for those students from a whole load of diverse backgrounds. My marketing manager isn't in the room, but if she was, she would be killing me because we're not supposed to be talking about this yet, but there'll be a Future Leaders competition for students from all sorts of backgrounds. And it doesn't matter if it's leading others or self-leadership. You know, we had an amazing conversation with a student the other day that had an absolutely traumatic home situation and had led themselves out of that by asking for the right help with the right people. So, so 3 things: resources already available on our website, conference, corporates coming and engaging with people, and a Future Leaders of the Year competition. That all of this is going to be launched next year.
I think if obviously following the Ivy House, you can get hold of a lot of that. But then also if you follow us on Twitter, I think my colleague John can put the information in the chat, then we will publicize a lot of the stuff you're mentioning, Alex, because we usually put the different stuff that you're working on, we retweet. So if you have a look at our Twitter account or the Ivy House account, you can get more of that. Another question was, because obviously a lot of the stuff you mentioned was about getting jobs, you know, presenting yourself, being a leader. But do you think we need some of those skills to be embedded into the early years of the curriculum, so earlier ages? What do you think?
Yes. Yes, I do. I couldn't agree more. We've started with 6th forms, and that was actually on the advice of the head, not even the head teachers, the teachers that we were working with and the heads that we were working with. And what I do believe is once you start to get this kind of learning in your school, then inevitably it becomes part of how the teachers show up. So one of the things we talk about a lot on the programs is about taking 100% ownership for the behavior you choose in response to any event that happens in your life. Now, the moment that's in a school, it doesn't matter if it's in the 6th form or if it's in reception year, you know, so as I said, we've got 5 girls. Well, you know, when we discovered, in fact, 3 of them are dyslexic, but when one particular one we discovered was dyslexic at age 7, I sat her down and I went, so you've got a choice. You've got a choice about how you react to this. You can choose to say it's not fair and da-da-da-da-da, or you can just knuckle down and learn the workarounds and you're going to be fine. But I'm not going to make that decision for you. Now, so I don't mind if I'm talking to a 17-year-old, quite frankly, a 57-year-old, which I was earlier this afternoon, or a 17-year-old. The messages are the same. What we're teaching people is the stuff that we've been learning while working with the most senior leaders, but the messages are the same. The stories and the context are different, but the teaching is all the same. So it goes through your culture. But yeah, next project will have to be getting tools and resources. We have those for sixth form. So we have those, and a lot of schools are using it in their fifth form as well. But our next job then needs to be to create it for younger, to give you those resources that you need. Yeah.
I'm not sure. I think most of the participants now are sort of secondary school teachers, but there was a question about higher education. How do you think some of the stuff you mentioned can be embedded? Because again, higher education can be quite rigid. So again, how do you think perhaps some of this...
Sorry, say that again. How do I think what?
Higher education degrees. Do you think there is space to talk about any of those human values and skills that you mentioned in higher education, or is it too late? What do you think?
Oh God, wouldn't we all want to redo this system? I mean, so 3 kids in university at the moment, one of them getting 4 hours 4 hours learning time for a week, but don't get me started on that subject. No, it's not too late. It's never too late. We always have to go back to the quote, never doubt the power of a small group of committed people to change the world. It's the only way it's ever happened in the past. So I did a talk just before lockdown, actually, to 750 undergraduates. And it was like I was a rock star when I came off stage. I mean, literally, I was just swarmed. They were everywhere around me. But the reality is they're all asking for this. Our challenge is how we get it to them. Because actually, it's really hard through the university system, which is set up all in faculties and all operate like separate businesses. So and I'll be honest with you, the one we've decided to start with is schools, because there's a direct route to schools. There's heads of sixth form, there's head teachers, there's PSHE, there's people that care about this stuff and want to make a difference. In universities, we're struggling to know where to start. But what is interesting is we're talking to people on the side of non-vocational work as well. Sorry, what am I talking about? The vocational paths. So there's a massive interest for people going into apprentices and all the rest of it. So we're talking about that. Haven't sorted out the university one yet, but if anyone wants to help us, I'm up for getting some help on that. That's a big job, I reckon. It's a big job. But oh my God, they need it. I mean, we do a lot of graduate training, and we run campfires at the end of the graduate training. And oh my goodness, the stories these guys are asking, the questions they're asking us. I mean, it's hot, it gets you here. I don't come off on those sessions not in tears. I've never done one. And if you listen to our podcast as well, I mean, I'm coaching with these, high potentials. Literally everyone we interview on those are high potentials. But you go and look at the problems and the challenges they're having. Massive.
And a controversial question, perhaps, but do you think that human values can be taught?
No.
Or are they just intrinsic? And just...
So I think, so this is fascinating. So if you go into the corporate world, traditional leadership development, what happens is a whole load of senior leaders, they sit in a room, they come up with the values of the organization, and then they put them on posters, and they get the statues, and they get all the bump, used to be mouse mats, you'd have them all on. And then they get all their new people, and they come along, and they put them in a room, and then they try and force the company values into them. No. I know, what my values are. I don't want yours, I want mine. So what we need to do is we need to give people the space and the tools, because most people do not know how to unpick their values and determine what they are. The space, the tools, the facilitation to discover what your values are, so you can then go and find the place to go and live and work because your values are being met. And this is, actually, I'm going to be controversial now. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to behave. I did promise I'd behave on this.
You managed so far, Elke. Let's not break that.
Yeah, crikey.
There is a question about high potential. What do you mean by high potential? I'm not entirely sure where exactly that refers to. I don't know if you can answer this one.
Yeah. So hypos. So in business, there's a massive thing around high potentials. So when they grade their talent. So you have an emerging talent pool, you have a succession talent pool, and within that you will have your high potential track. Businesses do it to varying degrees of success, but that's what I'm talking about with high potentials. And it is the people that are seen to be the leaders of the future, and therefore they make a decision to invest more in those people than they do in the other people.
And how does your approach fit with character education? So I guess, I mean, you know, you have the more, well, I don't know how to call it, but perhaps the work that the Jubilee Centre do, where they talk about character education, perhaps also the DFE, they have the character education sort of agenda, if you like. Where does your work fit within all of those approaches?
So the work that we do on the award has been mapped against various different models of character education, fusion skills, you know, skills builder, all of these sort of different things. I think the key difference, I would say, is that we start from a place of enabling people to find out who they are as an individual, as opposed to saying, this is the character that we want to teach you to have. What we're doing is actually saying to people, what choices do you want to make about who you want to be? Understand that, and then let's give you the skills to take that to the world. So on the front of it, if you were just looking, you would go, well, that's, you know, it's confidence, it's resilience, it's creativity, it's collaboration, and all the rest of it. Yes, absolutely. I would say we take it to a much deeper level, which is understanding who I am at my core, why I think like I do, why I feel like I do, why I behave like I do. And therefore, I am then enabled to create and become the character that I choose to become.
And then you mentioned you mentioned that example where there was 5,000 applicants or something ridiculous like that, and we see it all the time. And then when you have a very diverse pool of people that you're competing against, how do you think companies then say, okay, that person has values and drive and leadership potential? How do they identify that potential from your experience?
No, I tell you what's happened. This is a really massive change in recruitment, is that they try before they buy. The majority of graduate positions are offered to interns. So the most important thing is getting the internship. Now, you will have all heard about people, organizations that are either blacklisting Russell Group unis. I mean, you know, so it's like, oh, my words have gone. It's too, we're swinging the other way, but they're literally going, right now, we're now going to say, if you've gone to a Russell Group university, we're not going to recruit you. So there's a whole movement of that. But the other thing that people going grades agnostic. So they're actually looking at how people communicate, how they relate, and all the rest of it. I've forgotten the question though. Remind me what the question is.
How can you show your potential, your leadership potential, for companies to see you from that massive goal?
The really harsh reality is that you know, straight A stars and all the rest of it, they've almost become a hygiene factor, especially if you go to an independent school. So that's really important. So the reality is it's going to become through getting some work experience, getting on an internship, and then learning how to pitch yourself. So I trained a guy, a friend of a friend. My son's gone from all of these interviews, he never gets it and all the rest of it. And he's got 4 A's at A level and he's got a gold medal here. And I meet the guy and he comes into my sitting room and I'm like, hi, so tell me about you. And he goes, well, I went to this school. I'm like, well, right, we're done. I've already decided I'm not going to give you that job. We're done. So actually, somebody that can look someone in the eye, shake their hand, actually communicate with them, tell a story that is memorable. I told you about this graduate conference I went to, and I spoke to all these people. And I looked in the audience. It was like a sea of people. There was one girl in a red dress and one guy in a sort of bit of a funky thing. Everything else, brown, grey or black suits. I'm like, right, just come up here and look at what I'm looking at. None of you are going to be memorable. So it's about finding your pitch. We do a lot of pitch training, finding your stories. Nothing's interesting. Like, you know, if I said, you know, I'm 17 and I'm from Guildford and I went to Guildford High School, all boring, super, super boring. But actually, you know, if I said, one girl said to me the other day, the first thing you need to know about me is I have a flock of sheep. And we won, you know, we're a gold medal sheep winning family. And I'm like, I know you now, Hannah the sheep lady. And we are now in relationship because she knows how to tell stories about herself. So these are all the sorts of skills that we need to start teaching people. I keep talking. I feel really bad that I'm talking.
No, not at all. I think I'm just going to ask on the mic if anyone wants to just come on the mic and ask the questions, because I know people have, there's a great conversation happening, by the way, in the chat, but does anyone want to say anything? Does anyone come on the mic? That's your chance.
I will, please, Iro. Thank you. Hi. Elke, I love that. Thank you so much. That was fascinating. So my question is, I'm not a full-time teacher, but I'm a public speaker. I run workshops in schools and for companies and things about my own overcoming adversity and resilience and all the character skills that we're talking about here. So my question is, why is this just not something that's already embedded into the curriculum, into Ofsted? Why is this something that's just an external, it's almost we have to get external companies, speakers, workshop runners like myself, into the schools to discuss this and educate our children?
Number one, we should talk about the podcast, but number two, I don't know why is the answer. People are slow to change, and the stress, the pressure to get the performance results, the exam results is off the charts. So, you get what you measure. We all know that. And what's being measured is how many A grades do you get and how many B grades do you get. And I think this is an opportunity to create change. And it's about connecting all the kinds of teachers, all the passionate teachers that want to create the change. That's what I think. But I do think that there needs to be a coalition. My ideal would be that actually it was either put in teacher training, this kind of learning, or you had expert teachers that were put on a particular training, probably more like the training that you and I have done in our career, to become life and leadership skills trainers. Because, that's what you do for any other subject. This subject has got to say is probably even, I shouldn't say this, but probably even more complex than anything else, because we're dealing with people's emotions and minds and habits and all the rest of it. So I think we need dedicated teachers, or it needs to be in the teacher training curriculum. And even then you need dedicated teachers, because quite frankly, lots of people aren't interested, and that's fine too. Let's find the ones that are.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you.
The host muted me, but I'm the host. I'm muting myself. And anyone else wants to come on the mic? We'll have a few more minutes before we wrap up. So any last questions, anyone?
Hello, can I ask a question?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, please. Thank you, Elke. It's a very, very interesting. I'm just wanting to ask, just again, coming back to the high learning or high potential in an employment place. I just wanted to know, with students who have been already identified as having high learning potential, the same way that you would diagnose someone with ASD or ADHD, it's a diagnosis. And they are said to have a lot of potential, leadership skills and so on and so forth. Would that be the same as the high potential you're referring to? If they high learning potentials when they're in school, would that go on to shine in an employment, or it depends whether they've chosen well the field, or whether they're in the right place, or they have the other characteristic values?
That's a really great question, and I have a question for you. It depends how you define learning potential.
I think it's a diagnosis where first of all, they're very, very intelligent people. They've got extra IQs, but also a lot of other values, profound interest in something. They're very deep in what they do. They're leaders in whatever they do in their fields, and they have a passion in what they do, and they really devorate that passion. So if it's law, they'll be very much on top of the field, and they're usually leaders on it, etc., etc. So it's a kind of a whole host of assessments are done on a child, and
right.
They come as called as HLP. And I just wanted I was interested to kind of see whether there is a link between that.
Similar. It sounds very similar, if I'm honest. And again,
Okay.
it's not a universal measure. So every company defines its own hypo definition.
Okay.
So it's not universal. But what you will find is that academic ability is taken as a hygiene factor.
Okay.
What they're looking for is, can they create followership? Do they build trust-based, authentic relationships? Are they great communicators? Do people trust them? what we talk about, can they stay above the line rather than below the line, which means open and curious to difference, as opposed to far more concerned about giving their own opinion and holding their opinions closely and strongly. So that helps.
Thank you very much. Yeah, it sounds like, yeah, it's quite linked. Thank you very much. Yes, thank you.
Thank you. One last question from anyone.
Can I ask a question? It's really more of an opinion. Great talk, very inspirational. And I know that a lot of other people are saying we don't have time to do this, it's really difficult to integrate it. But I think that there are opportunities that we need to start taking on a regular basis during lessons, during lunch times, during break times, whenever we see pupils. And I would be absolutely interested. I mean, I literally just emailed a teacher and I said, so inspiring, this talk. I've already looked at the website and I think that, it is about tooling teachers up and any staff actually to work and to support pupils so that we can get this idea of leadership and confidence. Actually, I think a lot of young people are lacking confidence and not knowing who they are, and therefore they're just literally not going in any direction.
Thank you. And Fiona, I speak to teachers all the time. I have dogs walks with teachers, I have coffees with teachers all the time, because they're going, how do I do this? How do I find the time? How do I upskill? And so I think you're right. My view is always, let's find the catalysts, let's find the teachers that are prepared to do it outside of hours and bring their own learning up to where it needs to be. And we're here to support you to do that in whatever way we can. The only thing I would say about confidence is you've hit the nail on the head. And what I 100% believe is that every child, all of us, have confidence already built in within us. Our job is just get rid of those clouds that are clouding the blue sky and show them how to access it. And that is a facilitative job rather than a teaching job. So I couldn't agree with you more.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, can I jump in at this point? Unfortunately, we had to finish, have I jumped in too earlier? Go ahead.
John Bill, my colleague, has put a link. We have more talks this month. If you want to have a look at our Eventbrite page, there's more talks this month, so please do sign up. They tend to be interactive like this. I will let Johnny finish, and thank you so much, Elke.
I just want to say thank you. I want to say thank you, Elke, for coming on. You're inspiring, you're leading, you're also facilitating, and you've given lots of avenues that those who are here today can follow up if they want to find out more. They can go to the Ivy House website, of course. They can contact us directly, contact ERO. We can pass on more information and so on. But we'll make sure that any of you who want to know more or to follow up get a chance to do that. So thank you very much, Elke, for coming in, and I'm proud that Eton is partnering with you because I think this is very important work. Can I also say thank you to all of you who've given up an hour of your time on no doubt a very busy afternoon at a very busy time. Thank you for making the time to be here, and I hope that we'll have future contact with as many of you as possible.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. Been lovely to talk to you all. Take care.
Bye-bye.